Hello, folks. This is Mr. Walker coming back to you with our next round of notes. We are talking about sketching, notating, and drawing. Now, again, just like our last round of notes, there's going to be some definitions, a lot of blanks, a lot of clarification for what you might be seeing on the paper. So let's get into it. Yeah. All right. Let's get into it. All right. So, running through on the top, we got some things that we got to go through to do. So, using notation and symbols in mathematics is important and helpful, but can be confusing in geometry. There are notations that refer to actual geometric figures and notations that refer to the measure of figures. So, let's talk about these two main words here. One of them is congruence, and the other one is equality. So, when we're talking about congruence, we're talking about the shape. I want you to keep that in mind. When we're talking about equality, we're talking about measure. So, over on the left side, we got AB. AB is a figure, a segment. Okay. Now, over on the right side, AB is a measurement. Okay. So, this over here, we're just naming the figure over here. But this side, you notice that this figure AB has this measurement on top of it. If we were talking about this, we would be reading the length of segment AB. If we were talking about just the shape, we would just call it segment AB. Now, over here on the left side again, we're talking about this angle ABC is a figure angle. So we got this little shape right here. Now, anytime you want to refer to this shape, because we're going to be getting into this in our next part, this symbol here refers to the word angle. And if we give this angle before the points, we are talking about angle ABC. Or you could put that symbol and then ABC. Now, if you see M in front of that symbol, that is specifically talking about the measurement of that angle. Okay. So inside of here, you now see a number, 25. So we would say the measure of angle ABC is 25. So if you ever see M, that's talking specifically of how big this angle is. Now, when we're talking about figures, we use congruence. This symbol with the equal sign and the little squiggly line on top of it, this is the congruence symbol. Congruence means that you are looking at two symbols or two shapes that are the same. So we got AB is congruent to CD, angle ABC is congruent to angle DEF, triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. If we were talking about the measurements for these things to note, we're just using the equal sign. And also notice, if we're talking about a segment, you can just use the letters, and if you're talking about the measurement of an angle, you have to make sure you use the M before the angle symbol. Okay? So, a lot of different things between this side and this side. All right, let's go through and further define some things. When we're talking about congruent, we're talking about figures having equal length or measure, and we are assuming that the figures are never drawn to scale. Why do we assume that they're never drawn to scale? That's because I obviously don't have what is it? If I have a triangle and I say that one side is 3 inches, I'm not going to draw a 3 inch line on the paper because we'd probably run out of paper real quick. Okay. So what you're going to assume is whatever length they put on that side, that is what it is. Okay. All right. Let's get into some more things. We got some symbols here that we're going to be going through to be using for our stuff. We got up top, we got the symbol for our point. It's just a dot. For our line, you make sure that you have that line with the arrows at the end of it if you're talking about a line, as opposed to a segment or a ray. Segments don't have arrows. Rays have arrows only over the side where it's extending at. When we're talking about angles, there's a couple different ways you can do it. Most commonly, you'll see this first one from me, okay? But these symbols here, if you see them on test, just know those are also talking about angles. Over here, we got a triangle. This is the symbol for parallel. This is a symbol from perpendicular, which I hope you got from your glossary. And then we got congruent and similar. All right, things to note. when we're looking at shapes on our parts, or not parts, when we're looking at shapes in our notes or in our problems throughout the year, you're going to probably notice some marks being put on them. So here's a couple marks that we're going to be talking about. Let's say I got these two lines here. If you see on these two lines that you have arrows on side of them, like you have arrows in the middle of those lines, that is talking about if they are parallel. So these things we call feathers. So if you see that, that means that those two lines are going to be parallel. Next, if you see a box in a corner like this is going to let you know that this is a right angle. Well, we'll get into this a little more, but just remember this for, ahead of time. Next is a hash mark. Now, a hash mark is going to let you know which segments are congruent. So on this triangle, you see this little mark here and this mark. This is going to let you know that these two sides are the same. Now, if there are multiple sides in a shape that are the same, then they will use different marks for those sides. Like if I had, let's say, what am I gonna put? Let's say I had a rectangle like this. It's a little ugly, but you get the point. I would say that this side and this side are the same because we know rectangles have two sets of sides that are the same. So these sides are the same, and the top and the bottom are the same. Now, I would go through and put different types of hash marks on the top and the bottom than from the sides so that I can know this side and this side match up as opposed to these sides being confused with each other. Okay? All right. Last symbol that we got here is an arc. Now, an arc lets you know that two angles are congruent. So if I got this triangle here on the bottom, and you see those little curves inside on the angle, that will let you know that those two angles are congruent. All right, quite a bit of stuff that we talked about. Sorry about that, y'all. So, what you got here is on the left, you're going to have to go through and draw these shapes and label them using these markings. On the right, you're going to tell me if these statements are acceptable or not based off of what we have in our chart. Okay? So, sorry about that. Go through, try it out, give the video a pause, and then snap back into it when you're done. All right. I'm assuming that you went through and paused the video. So let's get into it. So over here, we got, it says JK, which is a segment, is parallel to MR. MR is a ray. So we first draw those two, JK and MR. JK with our two endpoints, MR with our endpoint at the M, and the arrow extending past the R. Since I'm saying that these two are parallel, I use these little feathers in the middle of it so that I know that this and this are going to match up. Okay? So these two lines are going to be parallel. Nice and easy. All right, next, I'm telling you that angle EGA, not EG, EFG and angle GFH are congruent. Now, there's a couple different ways you can write it. I decided to write it out like this. Since I've noticed that both of these two had G and F in common, I just felt like using that on both of them. So I have over here on the left side, EFG. Over here, I got GFH. These two are both congruent. So I would put this little arc inside of the angle to show me that these two are what matches up. All right. Last one we got here is determining whether or not these statements are acceptable or not. So let's look at our first one. It says RS is equal to QT. If we're talking about two lines, this would be acceptable. Okay. Next, it says the measure of angle RST is congruent to the measure of angle ABC. This would not be correct. If you're using congruent, you not want to use the M in front of the angle because congruent is talking about this shape and this shape. are the same. They match. Now, if you wanted to use this statement correctly, you would put an equal sign, not a congruent sign. All right, for our next one, this is how you would write that. So angle MNO is congruent to FDC. They have the congruent symbol. There's no M's in front of our angle symbol. It is all good and gravy over here. Next one we have segment XY is equal to segment BC. This one would not be correct. This is actually giving equal. So if we're talking about equal, you do not have to include the symbol on top of it. But if you do, you're going to be off. Then underneath, we got the measure of angle 1 is congruent to the measure of angle 5. That is also not correct. This is the same pitfall that we had on number 2 here. If you're talking about measurements of angles, you want to use equals, not congruent. And then for our last one, that's also incorrect because this is talking about it is equal to that. Okay. All right, folks. We went through and got a lot done today. So I hope that you're ready for the next bit of work. I'm going to catch you guys on the next video. Thanks for tuning in, people. See you later.